Legends are the new mechanic in set 9, so it's important to know when and how to use each and every one of them so that you can either master one that fits your playstyle or just know enough to use whichever is best in the current meta. Legends are things that you could pick before getting into a game, and they give you a bunch of different augments that are guaranteed to show up. And this happens on every single augment stage. Some are great for rerolling, some are great for fast nining, and some are good for win streaking and lose streaking. So hopefully this guide will help you choose your legends so that you can learn how to use them and find your own playstyle. Let's get right into it. Let's start off with Aurelion Sol. He allows you to become high level and play awesome units. From that description alone, you know that you are ready to power level. Naturally, he is great with fast 8 or fast 9 comps and metas. In stage 2, you get a bunch of augments that you could use to hasten your level ups by gaining a lot of free XP. In stage 3 too, you could just get a bunch of extra XP to level up right away. And then in stage 4, you get a combination of gold and experience. However, just because you can pick all of these doesn't mean you should. Let's think about when to take these. Well, in metas where 4 and 5 cost units are powerful, Aurelion Sol is sure to be good. Going back to stage 2-1, in this stage you can take an augment that gives you XP which saves you gold, depending on whether it's silver, gold, or prismatic. Keep in mind, XP is less valuable than gold because gold can buy either XP or champions and can be used to accrue interest. Therefore, XP augments have to give more XP than gold augments give gold. For all 3 of these, you also gain the ability to reach level 10. First things first, level 10 is a win condition, but you don't need to win every game. I know that this is an anti-fun type of concept, but it's important if you are actually trying to climb. That means that you need to identify which games will actually allow you to reach level 10. Remember hearing the terms playing for top 4 versus first or 8th? Well, if you're going for level 10, make sure it's a game to actually go for first. If you're just playing for top 4s, level 8 or level 9 might just suffice. Now, let's compare these augments with other options you can take. Most augments in TFT are econ augments, like the ones that are present for Aurelion Sol, power augments, something that makes your team stronger, such as an item or fight effects like healing orbs, or they're trait related. The same augment picking rules apply no matter which legend you take, which is a concept that I'm sure a lot of people would be surprised with. When picking your augment on 2-1, you want to maximize your health, gold, and strength of your team at some point later in the game. Sometimes that involves picking the Ezreal augment, but sometimes it involves picking some of the other 2 options. That means that sometimes win streaking augments actually give more value than the pure econ augments, and sometimes even more gold. For example, some games you get very powerful starts such as a fully upgraded board with strong early game items, and in this case, you would benefit greatly by skipping the Aurelion Sol augment and get a win streaking augment instead. Obviously, this is not going to be every game, but you always have to measure each augment against each other based on your current situation. So on stage 2, pick the Ezreal augment if you want to lose streak, and pick other augments when you want to win streak or force a specific trait augment. On stage 3 too, you can get some experience whether it's silver, gold, or prismatic. This is great to get level 6 or 7 really quickly. You will want to ideally roll on stage 3-2 to stabilize a bit if you have pairs, or wait until 3-5 for a fast 7 or 4-1 or 4-2 for a fast 8. Keep in mind that you don't always need this. If you're missing some key conditions that I'll mention in the fundamentals of TFT, I'll leave a link here below, but the video will be coming sometime in the future. Then you can pick one of the augments that give you some of those conditions. For example, if you really need critical strike and you don't have an Infinity Edge or Jeweled Gauntlet component, you may need to take Jeweled Lotus instead. If you need anti-heal, Red Buff would be pretty good. I'm not saying to always do this, but if you don't need that much money because you are super rich, then taking a non-econ augment would help more unless you plan to fast 9 and can hit all the conditions anyways. So only pick the Ezreal augments when you are power leveling, and pick other augments when you have enough gold and want to fulfill one of the conditions of TFT comps. Moving on into stage 4. For the stage 4 augment pick, this is a pretty easy decision point. If you're going to all in on 4-2 by leveling up to level 8, pick the Aurelion Sol augment and start your roll down immediately. If not, then get one of those augments that fulfills one of the missing conditions as discussed before. So either pick this augment if you're power leveling and rolling right there, and pick other augments when you're doing anything else. Next, I want to get into Bard. Bard allows you to gain even more power when you level up. He's great for playing flexibly because a lot of his augments are random. If you enjoy flexing and fast leveling, but by doing it yourself instead of relying on econ augments like Aurelion Sol, then Bard is a legend for you. Bard will be powerful in metas where teams can support multiple item holders. Normally, TFT gives you around 6 items at the end of stage 4, and this gives you 3 tank items and 3 damage items in most cases. Sometimes you get 1 extra utility item. With Bard, you have extra items to use to equip a secondary tank or damage dealer, so make sure you play comps that can actually support that. But let's check out the stage 2 augments. These all give pretty cool effects once you reach a certain level. In stage 2, you could choose a level up effect, which gives you either a champion at silver or items at gold and prismatic. These play very differently, but they're still quite similar. Bard is great for what I called delayed win streaking. With the silver and gold augments, you can just econ and lose streak until stage 3, then stabilize on stage 3 too. This is great for comps that like to stabilize at level 6. You can also delay the lose streak even further by waiting until level 7 at stage 3-5. Essentially, you'll want to pick this augment when you want to lose streak in stage 2, then spike in stage 3, and it's also good for comps with multiple item holders. Pick other augments in stage 2 when you want to win streak, force a specific trait augment, or full econ. Stage 3-2 is a little more flexible. It gives you items and gold, or just items when it's prismatic. This means that it gives you both immediate power and econ, so it's kind of like a half and half solution. Getting component anvils really help when you have a lot of components on your bench, and this helps you get more value out of them instead of waiting until the carousel round. Getting item anvils are great when you have your champion's core items, but need more just to buff them up. For example, if you have 1 tank item, 1 damage item, and 1 utility item at this point in the game, the item anvils are great at filling up the rest of your item slots on your main units. So that means you want to pick this augment when you need components for silver and prismatic, or if you just want a generic upgrade to your team since it's half a power augment and half an econ augment. Pick other augments if you do not need the component, or if you need to go more all in a different dynamic such as heavier econ or heavier immediate power, or if you are forcing a trait augment. Stage 4 is very similar to stage 3. It's a half power, half econ augment again. The difference now is that it only gives Zeke's heralds, and it doesn't give much gold. Keep in mind that gold loses power as the game goes on, so gold later in the game is not worth as much as gold in the beginning. Essentially, that means that these augments really just give a mediocre item. So you want to pick this augment when you have a 3 item carry that can use the extra attack speed from Zeke's, or if Zeke's is just a good item in the meta. Pick other augments in pretty much every other situation. Let's move on into Caitlyn. Caitlyn gets you stronger units at the start of the game. It seems that Caitlyn's legend mechanic is more tempo focused by giving you immediate strength, whether it be through getting upgraded units early or getting a lot of XP. Taking this augment at stage 2, especially at the gold and prismatic level, indicates that you really want a certain direction early game decided for you and you emphasize playing strongest board. Pick this augment when you value playing for tempo and win streak, or if you are willing to gamble for an immediate direction with the prismatic version. Pick other augments when you're not confident in sacrificing a combat augment for immediate strength, such as when you want something that could help you more as the game goes on. Another time you want to pick other augments is if you already have unit upgrades because you don't want to field too many upgraded units. Moving on into stage 3, where we get the knowledge downloads, these are not necessarily the most desirable augments. There are certain niche environments where they are takeable, especially for the silver one, but playing down a prismatic or even a gold augment for a relatively weak jump in XP is not that desirable in most cases. The silver one has slightly more merit than others because it's not that detrimental to your combat power, but generally, unless you have a very specific plan, other augments are going to be better. So only pick this augment when the other augments suck, or if you have an opportunity to break into the next level while maintaining a high econ. This is kind of like a general augment, but it's a bit on the weaker side. Pick other augments when you have more desirable combat augments tailored to your board, especially at the prismatic level, because the experience gained from this augment seems like a weaker windfall, which already wasn't that great. So you're generally going to pick some of the other augments in this stage. Moving on into stage 4, we kind of suffer from the same problem as the stage 3 augments. In stage 4, you generally want to add a lot of power to your team, and these often don't do that. Obviously, your board is still going to get stronger from the free rolls, but it's only going to be at that point in the game. In the super late game, these choices don't really help you at all. So only pick these augments when you don't have other options, and keep in mind that the prismatic version is oftentimes worse than augments such as Think Fast or Golden Ticket. If you're playing for a top 4 only, maybe you can consider taking these to kind of guarantee the 4th place, but it's often better to just pick other augments because they offer more utility or more power. And sometimes they even get the job done better, such as through Golden Ticket. Next, let's move on into Draven. And by the way, in case you want to read this guide, head on over to my website, bunnymuffins.lol/legends, for the full written guide. But Draven allows you to win big and get bigger payouts. His legend augments, especially on 2-1, are definitely one of the most fun augments that you can get, and are perfect for those who are chasing a loot high, or you're just trying to farm some YouTube videos. The prospect of getting more gold and item components is something that many players just can't resist. After playing with Spoils of War multiple times, these augments are certainly very fun to play around and could potentially be very rewarding once you stabilize your board. However, if you're a competitive player, you're going to struggle a lot whenever you pick this augment because it really revolves around getting lucky in the early game. So the lower rank you are, the better Draven is going to be. Pick this augment when you have a strong board because you need to increase your chances of killing enemy units as much as possible. Pick other augments if you want to lose streak, or if you could get a different combat augment because your team isn't powerful enough to make use of Spoils of War. It kind of is less fun to do that, but if you want to win, you got to make some sacrifices. Let's move on into Stage 3. So Stage 3 has a decent amount of utility. But oftentimes, again, as with all the other legend augments, sometimes the payout isn't quite worth it compared to the other ones that we can get. However, they are still playable, especially if you plan around it. Pick this augment if you get complete dog crap from everything else, or if you're lacking economy. The prismatic version of this augment is simply a worse version of Windfall, but is obviously still usable. Pick other augments if you pretty much don't need any sort of econ and can just get a combat or trait augment. Moving on into Stage 4, we have Rolling for Days again. Follow the same exact guidelines as you use for Caitlyn, but overall, these are generally going to be a little bit worse than every other option you can get. Moving on into Ezreal, the more items, the better. Ezreal is kind of like one of those slow starters, or like a late bloomer. He's kind of good at the delayed win streaks that we talked about before. You might not win the first round, but if you get lucky and win, then you'll certainly win the ones in the future. Because in Stage 2, his item augments are random, but if you hit decent augments, and if you win the first round luckily, you'll get a lot more power into the mid game. Think of these early game augments kind of as like mid game augments. You want to pick this if your components are awkward, such as you have 3 unbuilt components on your bench, because it gives you the potential to make 4 complete items after a couple rounds. Having a 1 or 2 item advantage in Stage 2 is often the turning point between completing your 5 streak and not completing it. Pick other augments in Stage 2 when you can have potentially a better fitting item augment such as Salvage Bin, or if you prefer something else that gives more immediate board strength, or if you want to completely lose streak. On to Stage 3-2. We have Tiny Grab Bag, Big Grab Bag, and Giant Grab Bag. Though the econ, components, and magnetic removers certainly have their place depending on your board situation, it does feel relatively underwhelming. And there are certainly better options to be had in augments of similar tiers. This again is kind of like one of those half power, half econ augments. You really only want to take this if you're going to complete items with leftover components, or if you're trying to build up your economy a little bit. Pick other augments in Stage 3 if you want to get specific trait augments, or if you have a specific condition you want to fill. Moving on into Stage 4, we have Well-Earned Comforts. It's kind of like a weaker cybernetic, but it is a very specific one, and you're guaranteed to get it. So if you plan to play around cybernetics, definitely go ahead and just pick Well-Earned Comforts. But unless your entire team is built around using Well-Earned Comforts, you're better off picking something else. Let's move on into Lee Sin, who allows you to refresh your shop for perfect units. Unfortunately, Lee Sin's augments are a little underwhelming and they're heavily utility based, and the rewards that you get don't really seem that worth it. That doesn't mean it isn't good in a reroll meta, But if you compare some of the augments to the ones from the past, they definitely are a bit weaker. Starting with stage 2-1, there are a lot of situations where On a Roll could potentially offer a ton of value, especially if you're going for 1-cost reroll. Pick this augment obviously only if you're playing reroll, or if you can get a lot of upgrades early on to fully maximize the value of the silver augment. The prismatic one does seem a bit weaker, but Trade Sector is a pretty average augment and decently consistent for a delayed win streak. Pick other augments in stage 2 when you want more board strength and want to push the tempo, or if you want to go on a full econ but don't necessarily want to reroll anymore. I don't know why you'd pick Lee Sin if that's your strategy, but hey, I gotta mention it. On to stage 3, we have Training Reward. I know we've been trashing on a lot of the legend augments in stage 3, but really only pick these if you misclick and are drunk. There are better econ augments out there, and honestly for reroll, you don't want to get too many econ augments because then you just fall behind much later in the game. So if you pick the Lee Sin augment in stage 2, you probably don't want to pick another Lee Sin augment in stage 3. On to stage 4, these augments are very similar to Draven's augments, but the timings are a little bit different, so use the same rules that we use for Draven. For most games of TFT though, you generally only want one econ augment, so you're better off picking almost anything else. Let's move on into Master Yi though. Master Yi allows you to grow stronger and stronger with every fight, and most of his augments seem pretty balanced in terms of strength and could be relevant to many team comps since attack speed, damage reduction, and mana regeneration are universally desired stats. If you want a safe, consistent option, Master Yi's augments could provide that. For stage 2, his augment is Pumping Up, which gives you scaling attack speed each round that goes by. If you're kind of undecided on what you want to do and want to flex between some of the AD carries or some of the attack speed carries such as Azir, these augments are pretty useful. But if you want to do something like a full lose streak or full win streak, other augments might be better in stage 2. Moving on into stage 3, you're able to get the augment Battle Ready. This one allows your team to deal more damage and take less damage. This is generally like a pretty decent combat augment because every team kind of wants this. Pick this augment when you just want a general combat augment as more of a safe option. Pick other augments if you want to improve a very specific area of your team or if you need some econ. Moving on into stage 4, we have Gotta Go Fast. This is a pretty niche augment. I'm not really too sure how to value move speed because a lot of units get it, but it doesn't ever seem that useful. Pick this augment when your team is heavily reliant on casting and if they're relatively short range, because movement speed is really good on low range champions. Pick other augments if you want more raw stats, or if you need to fill out a specific condition on your team. Let's move on into Ornn. Gain the power of Ornn's creations. Obviously, Ornn is going to give you a lot of cool items. I want to make a note that Portable Forge was one of the best options and the most popular options in past sets. Sometimes what you get is a little random, but the overall power level of the item is extremely strong. This legend is good if you like to play comps with lots of secondary carries because you get a bunch of extra items to support them. In stage 2, the best one at 2-1 is a classic gold augment, which is Portable Forge. The silver augment you only take if you want a lose streak with because it's a little delayed, and the same thing goes for Living Forge. Portable Forge is kind of the one where you could take it and start winning right away. Latent Forge is the one for lose streaking, and then Living Forge is kind of the in-between, even though their levels are all different. So that when you pick them depends on what you want based on what I just said. Pretty much you want to pick other augments when you don't want to rely on item RNG and get guaranteed power instead. For example, if you have like 3 2-star sorcerers or something like that, and you really just need an AP item, you might not want the Portable Forge because you could get something that's AD focused. Let's move on into stage 3. This is Small Forge, Medium Forge, and Large Forge. These are pretty specific because they are all anvils. So if you're already tunneled into a comp, these augments could be very useful. But if you're still flexing, you probably shouldn't take these because you'd rather get a random item rather than the anvil or something else. Pick this augment when you have open item spaces on your carries and you're planning on having multiple carries in your team. You could also pick these if your desired Ornn item isn't available quite yet if you get the prismatic. Pick other augments when you want to move more in a different direction than what you currently have in your team. Moving on into stage 4, we have Jobs Done, Jobs Well Done, and Masterful Job. These augments are very similar to the ones in stage 3, so use the same exact decision making that you used before in stage 4. But let's move on into Pengu. Pengu is play it safe, great for beginners, but I actually disagree with that. Pengu offers you a lot of useful augments, whether it be completed augments or HP healing, but Pengu really rewards lose streaking into flex play, which again is why I don't actually think it's great for beginners. For stage 2, Tiny Titans and Metabolic Accelerator have been staples for TFT ever since augments have come out. They're reliable and always relevant. Pick this augment when your early game board is bad and you're wanting to play for a lose streak and build economy. Pick other augments if your board is strong and you want to actually win streak instead. This is why I really like Pengu, because he's great for games where you get unlucky, which is a lot of them. And then if you do get lucky, you could always just pick something else. Moving on into stage 3, we have the item grab bags. Item grab bag is actually one of my favorite augments, but only in stage 2. I feel like the stages after that are a little suspect. However, you do get gold with the gold grab bag and the prismatic one, so I actually think the power level of this right now is pretty good. Pick this augment when you're lacking items and could make use of pretty much any item in the game. So if you're playing a comp that uses an AD carry, an AP carry, and a tank, the grab bags are extremely good for you. You could also just pick this if you're still flexing and don't have any committing items yet. Pick other augments if you already have a very specific direction, because grab bags are really just full of RNG. Moving on into stage 4, we have the final grab bags. These are pretty useful too because they give you components, spatulas, gold, and even a champion duplicator. It's kind of like some of those half and half augments that we saw before. Pick this augment when you have remaining components that you want to complete right away and not wait until the carousel, or if you need a spatula to complete an emblem or a tactician's crown. Pretty much, if you can get a spatula to make a tactician's crown, you always take it. Pick other augments if you already built a lot of your components, or if you need to fill out a different condition. Next up, we have Poro. Poro just gives you no tailoring, and it's just a classic game of TFT. If you've been paying attention to this video, you saw that a lot of the stage 3 and 4 augments for a lot of the characters are definitely weaker than everything else. So sometimes Poro is going to be the best option because you always get good augments. Obviously, if you're very comfortable with flex playing, Poro is going to be very good for you, and actually is one of the best legends in my opinion. But if you have not been paying attention, then I would go ahead and suggest you subscribe to the channel down below, because I definitely have your attention now. Let's move on into Tahm Kench. Collect as much gold as possible. Tahm Kench gotta be one of my favorite legends, because AFK and Rich Get Richer are probably some of my bread and butters from previous sets. He's kind of like the same as Pengu in that you want to lose streak early game with Tahm Kench, but here you get a lot more gold, but a lot less health, so it's much bigger risk but much bigger reward. I think at the start of the set, Tahm Kench is pretty bad to take because you don't really know exactly what the best comps are yet, or how to play everything or optimize everything. But as the set goes on, I think Tahm Kench will get better and better and better. So if there is one legend that you want to pick to just focus on the entire set and never play anything else and really just master, I think Tahm Kench is gonna be your guy. But if you're super competitive, oftentimes these augments in the past, such as the Rich Get Richer or Hedge Fund, well, I guess Hedge Fund didn't exist before, but there are augments very similar to it. They didn't really perform that well. And Rich Get Richer actually gives you 1 less gold than it did before, because it used to give 12. AFK also used to give 20 instead of 18. So it's pretty risky to take the stage 2 augments in super high competitive play. However, these still play into a general theme. Again, I think Tahm Kench players are going to improve a lot as the set goes on, but you generally only want to pick these augments if you're a greed lord and you love hoarding money to build for the late game. Pick other augments if you want to do almost anything else. Moving on into stage 3, we have balanced budget, but it just sounds like it's spread out a bit too much, because the gold that you get actually isn't that much. Pick this augment when you're a patient greed lord with low standards. Pick other augments when you want to increase placement and have augments that affect your board meaningfully. Moving on into stage 4, we have money, and money. It's just money, but it comes really late. But pretty much use the same exact standards that we use when judging for Lee Sin, which is pretty much only take this if you desperately need money because you failed to econ properly in the early game, but generally you want to pick anything else. Again, stuff like Think Fast is a lot better than some of the stuff here. But let's move on into Twisted Fate. This one is really cool and very popular in China. Twisted Fate's augments are pretty strong because it gives you perfect items every time. Next, Zeke's Herald is very good for a lot of comps in the meta right now, such as Gunners and Deadeyes. So if you like getting perfect items for your team, TF is definitely going to be the pick for you. In stage 2, all variations of Pandora's is very useful. The silver and gold augments are pretty consistent as they will almost always get you the items you need, but the prismatic one is a bit risky. Pick these augments when you want specific items for a certain comp and are willing to sacrifice a few rounds to get your items. Pick other augments if you want more upfront power or are looking to streak and push the early game without emphasizing best in slot items. I guess you should also pick other augments when you already get super good items in stage 2. Next, let's move into stage 3, which is the item grab bags. Again, same standards as we used before. If you don't really know what direction you're going in, these items are going to be really good, but the difference is with TF is that you have Pandora's items. But of course, you only want to pick these augments when you can make use of any item, such as having a comp with an AD, AP, and tank carry. This could be something like the Shurima comp, where you could put attack damage items on Akshan, ability power on Azir, and tank items on either Cassante or Nasus. Pick other augments if you already have enough items and rather have something like economy or just pure combat augments. On to stage 4, these are going to be the teaming up augments, and these give you Zeke's Heralds. This is pretty much only good if you need attack speed in your comp, so if you don't need it, don't pick these at all, but these are crucial in a lot of attack damage comps, especially if you have something like Jace, because Jace naturally always wants to be next to his teammates. Generally though, this is going to work really well in Gunner or Deadeye comps, but it could also work if you're playing Azir or Kai'Sa. Pick other augments if you just don't need the Zekes, because there are definitely other options that are just as good. Moving on into the next one, we have Earth.
Welcome to Earth.
Earth is going to be for the players that love emblems. So Earth is pretty consistent and is especially good if you like farming Piltover stacks early on in the game, or if you like going deep into certain traits but are kind of flexible about it. If you like living life on the edge though, the random emblem that comes out with a silver augment might just scratch the itch inside you for your RNG cravings. But the other tomes are almost always useful, and you can tailor 2 tomes and high roll sometimes, such as getting +2 Void. Those games are pretty much auto wins. You want to pick Earth augments when you have 1 or 2 specific team comps that you want to build around and are willing to gamble those tomes to get, or you can also just open the tomes like a madman, without tailoring at all right as you get them. Pick other augments in stage 2 if you want something more consistent and reliable. Moving on into stage 3, all these grab bags are pretty decent, but it seems like Giant Grab Bag is probably where you get the biggest power spike, so take it when you can. Obviously, you want to pick this when you need components, because that's going to be the main draw from this augment. So if you have a lot of uncompleted items on your bench, this is going to be it for you, or sometimes you need the duplicator or the gold. Pick other augments when you have something that could improve your team even more, such as when you already have good items, and then you could get something like red buff if you're missing that type of anti-heal. You could also even take econ augments if your econ is lacking at that stage in the game. Next up, we have stage 4, which is final grab bags and Earth's grab bag. These are all pretty generally good augments, but they're kind of half and half, and again, you really only want to take them if you could really make use of those components, because if not, they're going to be completely random and you probably wouldn't be able to build something good anyways. So if you want more pure power, definitely pick something else, or if you want pure economy, other options definitely work better as well. Moving on into the next champion, we have Veigar. Deal big damage with your champion's abilities. So Veigar's augment options don't really stand out that much, but they're all pretty solid. They're not too strong or too weak, so it's kind of like a Master Yi, but more for casters. So if you like playing comps that deal with critting a lot, Veigar's definitely going to be the guy for you. And that generally means focusing more on comps that deal spell damage rather than auto attack damage. This augment is great when you want to play multiple carries, and you already know that from stage 2. If you're only playing with one carry, you could just settle with the silver augment too. Generally though, Jeweled Lotus is more of a late game augment, so it's not going to give you that much power in the early game, even though it is considered a combat or power augment. So if you want even more power, pick something else, or if you want a lose streak, definitely go for the econs instead. Moving on into stage 3, we have Tiny Power. It's not really a game changer, but it's just an average buff for your entire team. So pick this augment when you just need a generic stat boost and are out of other options, and pick something else when you have something else that could improve your team even more than this, because most augments generally do that, either in raw power or setting yourself up for the future with something dealing with economy. Moving on into stage 4, we have Ascension. Ascension is one of those classic TFT augments, however, it is a bit different taking it at stage 4 versus the early game. It really depends on your comp. But if you have a very strong front line, Ascension is going to be the augment for you, because this is really good in any fights that last really long, which again is going to be comps with good frontline. Think of Mech in previous sets. However, if your frontline is garbage, you're better off picking other combat augments, but Ascension is really good for Veigar because it's kind of like his most defining augment. Some players pick it specifically for the Ascension. So pretty much pick Veigar if you know that the comps that are powerful right now are the ones with big tanks. Let's move on into the final legend, which is Vladimir. And by the way, if you did last this long in the video already, go ahead and comment below your favorite legend, just so I know what to focus on in the future. But Vladimir is pretty useful and pretty flexible. In stage 2, his augments are transfusion, which gives your units health, and you get more health based on your missing health. Pick this augment if you want a generic option that makes your team a little beefier, and pick other augments if you want a little bit more direction. Transfusion is kind of like a non-committal augment because it kind of gives your team a little more board strength now, but it also favors that you lose in the early game to get more strength later. It's kind of like another half and half, which seems to be the theme of a lot of the legend augments, ironically. Moving on into stage 3, we have Battle Ready, which we talked about before with Master Yi. Battle Ready, again, is just like a mediocre stat boost to your team. It's nothing insane, but it's also not bad, but it's pretty much always going to be useful. Pick other augments if you want something more specific that powers up your team, or if you want to build more economy for stage 4 rolldowns. Moving on into stage 4, we have the Ascensions again. Same rules apply with the Veigar, so you have to really compare the benefits of the earlier augments between Vladimir and Veigar to kind of decide who to go. Again, if comps in the meta are really strong in tankiness, then taking Ascension is very, very powerful. Think of all the stall comps from the past. But if you don't have a good front line, you have to pick other augments, or if you lack economy. So if you lack economy, of course you have to pick an economy augment, but if you lack tanks, you definitely have to choose other combat augments instead. I want to end this video with my tip of the day, and it has to deal with legends. And the one thing to keep in mind is that even if you do choose a legend, you are never forced to go the augment it gives you, even if you really like it or decided to pick it before the game happened. Always tailor your augments to your current board, and that's going to change from every single game. But that's going to be it for me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this legend guide. Again, let me know which ones are your favorite, and if you want to learn more about the fundamentals of TFT, I have that link to the video right here.